afternoon, everybody. I'm Dave Robbins with End Time Ministries. Thank you so much for joining me on this edition of End of the Age. You know, in the end time, money will have a lot to do with the power of the Antichrist and Satan himself. They will use an economic sanctioning system to get control of your livelihood to force compliance to their system. And I'm going to be talking about precursors to that, things going on as we speak, this big trickle-down effect from the global elites into our communities. 1 Timothy 6:10, the Bible says, "For the love of money is the root of all evil." I did not say the money is the root of all evil. It's the love of money. You can go to heaven and have money. But when you get to loving money and will step on people to get money and run a corrupt organization and push propaganda for money, now you've got a problem. 2 Timothy 3, in the New Living Translation, the Bible says, "You should know this, Timothy, that in the last days there will be very difficult times, for people will love only themselves and their money." And then, of course, Revelation 13, 16 through 17. The Bible says, "And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their forehead, and that no man might be able to buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name." An economic sanctioning system to force compliance to get people to pledge allegiance to the Antichrist. If he can get control of your money, your power to buy and sell. Most people, the Bible says, everyone whose name is not written in the Lamb's Book of Life will fall to that, and they will pledge allegiance to, thereby worshiping the Antichrist and his global governing system. Economic control. Well, the World Economic Forum's Great Reset, the Council for Inclusive Capitalism, Build Back Better, and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals all have one common denominator: the control of other people's money. Because if you can get control of somebody's finances, you've got them, right? It's called wealth redistribution. Now, I want to be honest with everybody. I got an education today. I study this stuff all the time. Been studying it for years. But I wasn't aware of a certain aspect of the trickle-down effect all the way from the Bank of International Settlements into our communities. And that's one of the things, my main point that I'll be bringing out today. How is this all working, this world governing system and everything? How are they going to bring it right down into our neighborhoods? Well, the Sustainable Development Goals. I'll start with that, then we'll get to the Federal Reserve, and then we'll get to BlackRock, and we'll get to all kinds of stuff. So the Sustainable Development Goals, they were unanimously adopted by 193 member states of the United Nations, including the United States, back in September of 2015. And those goals make up the international community's 15-year socialistic blueprint of global governance for every person on the earth. Remember, I said the common denominator of all of these is wealth redistribution and economic control. Well, the Sustainable Development Goals, this plan, this global elites plan is called Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And it is a universal policy agenda designed to convert the nations of the world into a global community governed by the United Nations. And if they can get control of the economy in that country, they can control the country, right? You're controlling the wealth of the world. And I'm going to show you how they do that in just a moment. The agenda is comprised of 17 main goals, the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, accompanied by 169 focused targets designed to manage the planet. It is socialistic because the plan includes the socialistic principle of wealth redistribution. Somebody else redistributing your wealth. And states that it actually states that the reduction of inequality will only be possible if wealth is shared and income inequality is addressed. In other words, wealth redistribution. And it is also global governing of every aspect of every person on earth, since the plan states, and I'm quoting, "We commit to make fundamental changes in the way that our societies produce and consume goods and services. Governments, international organizations, the business sector," which is I'll get in deep into here in just a moment, "and other non-state actors and individuals must contribute to changing unsustainable consumption and production patterns." And the propaganda is that humans are using the earth's resources at such a rate that nothing will be left for future generations. Every time you hear that, think of a lie. That's propaganda. That is absolutely not true. If all the governments of the world would get their hands out of the farmers' cookie jars, that we could produce food like you can't imagine. But the governments are involved in just stymieing the whole thing. And therefore, the United Nations, the world government, must establish a master plan to govern the serfs or the earth's citizens. And it must, in true socialistic form, redistribute the wealth of the world so everyone is considered equal, control the production and consumption of every person, strive to achieve universal health care, control the climate, manage our cities and infrastructures, govern the oceans, and govern land usage along with all ecosystems. It's the global government 101. These are the Sustainable Development Goals. This is world government. But how are they going to implement that into our communities? I tell you what, everybody, it comes all the way from the Bank for International Settlements, which is the central bank of the central banks. And we'll get deep into that on the other side of the break. Should get an education. I chose to open with the Sustainable Development Goals today because I want you to know that all of this is happening by grand design to control every person on the earth. Do you think that the immigration problem on our southern border, do you think that's happening by, it's just a coincidence, that it's by accident? Do you think our housing problem here in America, do you think that's by just, oh, that just happened out of nowhere? Do you think the ESG metrics being placed on major corporations and the supposed climate catastrophe that we're living under, keeping everybody in fear mode, all these different huge things that are happening all of a sudden right now, just looks like the earth is just flying apart at the seams. What's going on? Gas prices going up. Do you think that's an accident? Tax rates going up because of this. The housing problem is driving the cost of, or the price of home values up, which allows the cities to tax you more. You think all of this is by grand design, or it just happened by coincidence? It's just an accident, right? All of this. Well, I can tell you it's not. Remember the Sustainable Development Goals. So the Council for Inclusive Capitalism, their website says that council members make actionable commitments aligned with the World Economic Forum. So they're all in cahoots together, folks. And their International Business Council's pillars for sustainable value creation, people, planet, principles, and governance, and prosperity. So the Rothschilds, Linda Forster Rothschilds over this, the Council for Inclusive Capitalism, is working with the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset. And they say, what are they working for? To advance the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. What's that? The socialistic blueprint to govern every person on the planet. Their goal is to move people off of shareholder capitalism and to implement stakeholder capitalism, which is where the public or the government has a say in how a company is ran and how the profits are distributed. The same thing goes for Build Back Better and along with Klaus Schwab's World Economic Forum, the Great Reset. They're all in cahoots, everybody. They're not just, they're not working against each other or, hey, let's come up with this new plan, the Great Reset, but the Rothschilds, you work on something else, and then all most of the leaders around the world, they're all talking about the Build Back Better. Antonio Guterres with the United Nations talking about Build Back Better. They're all saying the same thing because they're all on the same team. And globalist elites have known for decades that they would need to control the economy of every nation or other people's money in order to control the people. Now, I want to talk to you about the Federal Reserve, our Federal Reserve here in the United States. Every developed country in the world has a central bank. The Federal Reserve is our central bank. The central banks are all ran by the Bank for International Settlements, which is the central bank of central banks. That is the hub. You need to do some research and look up the Bank for International Settlements. And get into, don't go to the first page of Google and think you're going to get really what it's all about. You'll have to go several, maybe 100 pages back. I don't know. But let me just give you a little history on our central bank. Starts with Mr. Paul Warburg. Mr. Warburg was a member of the M.M. Warburg and Company bank family, one of the most powerful banking firms in Europe back in 1895. Warburg married Nina Loeb, the daughter of Solomon Loeb, founder of the Kuhn, Loeb and Company, one of the largest banks in America. You've heard about all the bloodlines and all that stuff. Well, this formed an alliance between what was probably the largest banking firm in Europe, and that's the Warburg and Company, and then Kuhn and Loeb Company here in the United States of America. But we need to look a little closer at this gentleman named Paul Warburg. In 1902, Warburg moved to the United States and became a partner in Kuhn, Loeb and Company. He also remained a partner in the Warburg family firm in Hamburg, Germany. So he's a key player in Germany, in Europe, since Germany is the heart of Europe, and he's a key player now here in the early 1900s in the United States of America. Because of his outstanding knowledge, people thought he was the most knowledgeable person about banking on the planet. Because of his outstanding banking knowledge, he quickly became very influential in banking circles here in the United States. Now, also upon arriving in America, he devoted himself to writing papers about why America should have a central bank. Well, now we had resisted for since 1776, having a central bank, because our forefathers understood that if you get a central bank that can control all of the economics of a nation, that they will soon enslave the people. So, we bitterly fought against that. And it had been tried several times, but we never allowed it to happen. However, back to Mr. Paul Warburg. He began to write very persuasive papers as to why we should, in fact, have a central banking system here in the United States of America. Well, soon he acquired a really powerful ally by the name of Senator Nelson Aldrich in Rhode Island. You may recognize the name Nelson Aldrich because his daughter was married to John D. Rockefeller. You see how all this is all intertwined together. Well, and their son was named Nelson Aldrich Rockefeller, who then became Vice President of the United States of America. So you see how all this plays out over time. Anyway, he acquired this very powerful ally, Senator Nelson Aldrich of Rhode Island, the czar of the Republican Party and chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. Well, they wanted a central bank, but there was so much opposition to it, they decided they had to do it in secret. So, in November of 1910, someone said, hey, let's all go hunting. But none of them hunted. So everybody watched everything these powerful bankers did, and so they had to be very careful. So they all had these gun cases, and they all got on the train to go to this secret quote-unquote hunting trip, but it was actually a secret meeting on Jekyll Island off the coast of Georgia. Everything I'm telling you, you can go read about this stuff yourself. It's everywhere. But under the guise of this duck hunt, Senator Aldrich and Paul Warburg and 4 other experts sneaked off to discuss bank reform at this secret hideaway on Jekyll Isle off the Georgia coast. G. Edward Griffin wrote a great book called The Creature from Jekyll Isle. You want to read all about it? He did all the research. It's all there. It's very documentable. Now, in attendance in this secret meeting was Henry Davidson of Morgan Bank, Frank Vanderlip of the National City Bank, Benjamin Strong, Vice President of Bankers Trust Company, Piet Andrew, the former Secretary of the National Monetary Commission and now Assistant Secretary of the Treasury a few years ago. I should say, yeah, it was a few years ago at that particular time. The real purpose of this historic duck hunt was to formulate a plan for U.S. banking and currency reform that Aldrich could present to the Congress in order to establish a central bank here in America. Now, this secret meeting on Jekyll Island, which happened, November 1910, during the secret meeting of these powerful banking interests, the general outline of the Federal Reserve Act was determined. Paul Warburg was the principal architect. Remember, he was also involved in the big European banking firm, the Warburg banking firm. So the purpose of the Federal Reserve Act was to place, now very slowly here, the purpose of the Federal Reserve Act was to place control of America's money in the hands of these private bankers. If passed, the Federal Reserve Board would set interest rates and determine the amount of money in circulation. Okay? Now, at that time, it was the job of the Congress. It still is the job of the Congress, but it was the job of the Congress up until that point. It's in our Constitution that the Congress is to set the interest rates. But now, you tell me, go to the news right now and see if the interest rates are going to go up. Who raises the interest rates? It's not our Congress. It's the Federal Reserve, right? The central bank that was established back in the early 1900s. But it's in our Constitution that the Congress is to set the interest rates. The Congress is to determine the amount of money in circulation, and that's how you regulate the economy, by an elected group of officials in the Congress. But it's going to now take that away from the Congress and put it in private hands, the hands of these private bankers. Mayor Amschel Rothschild, you remember the statement he made. He said, give me a control of a nation's money, and I don't care who makes her laws. And they were grasping for control of America's money. Remember what the Bible said in the end time, the love of money, the root of all evil. In the end time, people will love only themselves and their money. And that the world government will use an economic sanctioning system to get people to conform to or to bow down to their edicts. Well, here's an interesting quote from the Jekyll Island. If they said, and I'm quoting, if it were to be exposed publicly that our particular group, and he's talking about the elite bankers, had gotten together and written a banking bill, the bill would have no chance whatsoever of passage by Congress. That was Frank Vanderlip, the president of the National City Bank of New York at that time. So what was the outcome? Well, on December 23rd, 1913, the Federal Reserve was enacted. The Federal Reserve Act became law, and stock was owned by private stockholders. They gave private banking interest control of the U.S. economy. And that's the way it is today. This is America's central bank, the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve has nothing to do with our government. It's no more federal than, Federal Express. It's a private group of bankers that now raise our interest rates, slow the economy down, lower interest rates, speed the economy up. Okay? So the central banks across the globe are how the globalist elite control the world's wealth under the direction of the Bank for International Settlements, which is the central bank, that's the hub of the central banks around the world. Now, how could this play out right here in the good old U.S. of A.? Well, according to the news source, The Conversation, together, BlackRock, these investment firms, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, have nearly $11 trillion in assets under management. That's more than all sovereign wealth funds combined and over 3 times the global hedge fund industry. Very powerful, influential investment firms. Together, they call them the Big Three, are the largest single shareholders in much of the S&P 500 firms. Now, folks, I got to tell you, the rest of this, well, I should say much of it, was an education to me. I follow this stuff all the time. But I did not realize, I wondered, because my wife Jana, and I sold our home about 6 or 8 months ago. Because the market was up, and we thought, hey, we'll sell our home, and we'll use the money we make off of that to put a down payment on another house, and hey, we'll get another house, we'll make a little money. Well, we sold our home, but oh my goodness. Right now, I'm living in like a 1,100 square foot apartment because housing prices have skyrocketed. And for me to jump out into the housing market right now, I'm gonna pay so far over what the houses are worth, I'm not gonna make any money, I'll probably lose money. And this is what's happening around the United States. So, got to doing some research, trying to figure everything out, and oh my goodness, did I get an education. A lot of people think, oh, and I've talked to realtors that are like, really just don't know what's going on. One thing, I had a lady that was in my Bible study last Thursday night. She's a realtor. And she told us, she said, it's crazy because a lot of corporations are buying up entire neighborhoods and then renting them out. And I thought, really? I thought a few corporations here and there. But she said, no. They're buying up all the property and renting out the homes. Well, I got to doing some research, and I tell you what, on the other side of the break, I'll educate everybody.